So our next topic is going to be adding Google fonts to our style sheet, and then having those, linking those up through our CSS onto our HTML file. So let's go ahead and we'll just make a new folder. Call it Google Fonts. Okay. And we'll new window in VS Code, drag the folder. Okay, and then we're going to make an index file. Exclamation point. And we're going to give it a title of Google Font Demo. Okay, and then we're going to add a CSS folder. And then inside that CSS folder, we're going to make our style.css file. Okay, all set. Go ahead and link that. And make sure that our path is correct. There we go. All right, all our basics are in place. For this demo, just going to have a headline and a paragraph. So, been here before. So I'll go ahead and add a paragraph. And just some placeholder copy. And actually, I'm going to add a second paragraph. Okay, our basics are in place. That's all saved. So we'll go ahead and open with live server. There we go. All right, there's all our basics. So we have our placeholder content in place. And, as the name suggested, we're going to use Google Fonts to style our text, right? And we're also going to do a little basic layout. Start to warm ourselves up with that, get used to some text properties in the CSS. So since we're going to go ahead and use Google, let's go over to Google Fonts, right? So it's fonts.google.com. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to use the Google Fonts on our website, right? And this is something that Google has set up, and they host the fonts. We link to them, and then they show up on our site. So let's go ahead and see how that's done. So for my demo, I started for just a little fun with Balu Buy, I guess. So let's go ahead and click on that. So now it's got, once it loads up, we see what our weights are, right? So let's take a little notice. So the lightest weight, the boldest weight, and note this number, right? 400, 800. 400 is the regular weight. So when we're dealing with weights with web fonts, we can use the number, right? And if the fonts are available, so it goes from 100 being the thin all the way up to 800, whatever the highest number is. So for our purposes, we're going to select the regular, we're going to select the bold, and we're going to select the extra bold. Okay. So now we've got our styles, right? Just by clicking them, you see they've added them to the list, and then it automatically gives us this section, use on the web, right? And if you remember from our earlier demo, right, there's a link version and an import version. So let's just take a look, right? So we could import them, right? Style, right? Remember the style tag in the head. right? And then it's like at import, and then it loads up the font, right? That works perfectly well. The other one version is the link, right? And this one's a little more complicated. You don't really need to go through all this. The main point here is that we're going to copy one of these versions, right? And then we're also going to need to copy the CSS rules to specify the families. So this link code will make the fonts available to our HTML page, and then these rules will what we'll use in order to assign various tags to those styles, right? So let's just go ahead and do that. So we're going to copy that. All right. And what's important, right, is remember the file is read from the top down, right? So all the instructions start with it and then read down. So before we apply any of our styles, we want to make sure that the font is loaded. So to do that, we add the code that we've copied from Google, just as they've asked us, right, above our style sheet, right? So this pre-connect to the font sheet static, and then our link rel style sheet, right? It includes all the font information. Don't worry about what this is, only just make sure that it's copied correctly, right? That you don't miss parts of it. And then we can go ahead and save that. Okay. And now our fonts are connected to our file, right? So any file that we want to use these fonts in, we have to include this link up at the top, just like our link to our style sheet. So what's going to happen? Fonts are going to load. Then once the fonts are loaded, the styles will be applied, and we're going to use those font styles on our elements here. Okay. All right. So let's just go back and just give that a try, right? Whoops. Right, I also mentioned that we're going to need these fonts rules, so I'm going to copy those as well. All right, on to our style sheet. So I'm just going to make a little section just as a reminder to myself. Command / and I just want to have those available, right? It's just a reminder of my Google font styles. Let's call them Google. So that when I want to use one of those fonts, this is what I have to use. So let's just go ahead and do that, right? Just as a test. And then I'm just going to copy this whole thing, and we'll talk about what this all means in a second. And I'll save that. And there it is. Okay. Now, if you noticed, before the Google font loaded, we were looking at kind of like a scripty type of typeface zap something or other. That's a result of the rule, and what this is called is a font stack, right? So what that means is we're specifying the font family for the H1, and we're telling it use this Google font, Baloo by 2, right? But if that font is not available, right, depending on the font that we use, we then add a second option called cursive. And what this is saying is when you style the font text, first look at the font family, use Baloo by, and if that's not available, roll back and then use any cursive font, right? So any kind of script font or pen stroke font. And that's all there is to it, right? We go to Google Fonts, we copy whatever it is we need to link, and then we can go ahead and use it, all right? So let's go back to Google Fonts. We'll leave this here for now. What if I wanted to add an additional font, right? So I got a headline font, and now I want to use, maybe some other font. So let's go back to Browse, and I'm going to say, let's use Dosis. Yeah, and for doses, I want the light and I want the medium. Okay. So now I've got a number of fonts. I've got 2 font families. I've got Blue By, I've got doses, I've got the different weights. I can check all my weights. And if we take a look down here, right, it's now modified, right? So you can see it says Blue By and it's got doses. So it's added some additional stuff. And it's got more stuff in the font rules. So, you know, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing we just did. I'm going to modify. I'm going to copy this whole thing. And go back here. And now I'm going to replace those links that I just pasted in. Put a tab right there. Okay. And this is a little bit longer, so now I have access to all the fonts I want. And the same thing. Just going to keep track of the font names. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that. And then let's go to style, and we can just go ahead and say use doses and save that. And there it is, right? You can see it's sort of a little rounded, right? A little round with little hooks on them. But there we are. We're now using our custom fonts, right? And if we can go ahead, if we want, we can say make that a little bigger. And you saw the sans serif, you saw the flash while we were waiting for the font to load. And then for headline text, let's go ahead and do a font size of 96px. Right. And there we are. We're styling our text. 1, 2, 3, super quick. All right. So I'm going to make these videos a little bit shorter. That's enough for getting the Google fonts on. In the next one, we'll add a little more layout to this and put some color in. So play that one next, and we will carry on.